At about 10:10 on the morning of June 15, 1904, the General Slocum ran aground on North Brother Island with 1,388 people aboard. Fire had driven most of the passengers, mainly women and children, toward the stern, which still hung over deep water. Some life preservers split open when people pulled at them. None of the lifeboats was successfully lowered. In less than 20 minutes, the wooden steamer became impossible to remain on, and roughly 1,000 people died. Yet federal inspectors had examined the Slocum only weeks earlier and issued a new safety certificate. This was not one freak accident. It was a chain of dangerous storage, defective equipment, an untrained crew, a disputed delay in reaching shore, and an inspection system that had approved all of it. So how did a certified passenger steamer become a floating death trap? And why did one of New York's deadliest catastrophes fade from broad public memory? The passengers came from a German-American neighborhood on Manhattan's Lower East Side, known as Kleindeutschland, Little Germany. German was spoken in its homes, churches, businesses, clubs, and newspapers. Mark's Evangelical Lutheran Church was one of the institutions holding that community together. Every year, the church chartered a boat for its Sunday school excursion. June 15th marked the 17th outing. Families gathered at the East 3rd Street Recreation Pier for a trip to Locust Grove, a picnic ground on Long Island Sound. The Federal Commission later counted 1,358 passengers and 30 officers and crew. 745 passengers were children. The Commission estimated that no more than about 10% of the passengers were adult men. Among those boarding were Paul and Anna Liebenau and their daughters Helen, Anna, and 6-month-old Adela. With relatives and friends, their group numbered 11. The vessel waiting at the pier appeared more than large enough for the excursion. Built in 1891, the General Slocum was a 250-foot wooden side-wheel steamer with 3 passenger decks. It was licensed to carry 2,500 people, far more than were aboard that morning. Captain William Van Schaak had commanded it since it was built. Federal inspectors examined the Slocum on May 5, 1904. A new certificate was issued the next day. On paper, the boat was ready. Below the main deck, near the bow and almost directly beneath the pilot house, was a compartment called the forward cabin. It served several purposes at once: lamp room, steering engine space, and storage area. Investigators found barrels of oil, paint containers, lumber, canvas, charcoal, old hose, spare equipment, and barrels of glassware packed in hay. Oil had spilled onto the floor. Crewmen entered the space with matches, and an open torch had also been used there. The Federal Commission could not determine the exact ignition source. It concluded that the fire began in the forward cabin and probably started near one of the hay-filled barrels. The uncertainty matters. The disaster did not require a dramatic act of sabotage or a secret plot. A small, ordinary spark was enough because the compartment had already been allowed to become dangerously combustible. The rest of the ship was built almost entirely of wood. Its decks and superstructure had been painted repeatedly and dried through years of exposure. Once fire escaped the compartment, there were few structural barriers to slow it. That made the emergency system critical. A crew should have been able to attack a small fire with the steam pump and hose, organize passengers, prepare the boats, and distribute working life preservers. On the Slocum, nearly every layer failed. The main fire hose was cheap, unlined linen. It was several years old and, according to the Commission, had apparently never been tested by running water through it. Fire buckets were empty or difficult to reach. No fire drill or boat drill had been held that season. Most of the deckhands were new to the vessel. There were 6 metal lifeboats and 2 life rafts. None was successfully lowered during the disaster. Many life preservers were filled with granulated cork, but their canvas covers had deteriorated. When passengers pulled at some of them, the covers tore and the cork spilled out. The Slocum left the pier between 9:30 and 9:40 and headed north through the East River. Passengers filled all 3 decks as the steamer approached Hell Gate, the narrow and turbulent passage between Manhattan, Queens, and the River Islands. Below them, the fire was growing in the forward cabin. The first moment of discovery remains disputed. Smoke appears to have reached the main deck before the pilot house received a clear warning. By the time the mate sent word forward through a speaking tube, the crew's best chance to contain the fire was already shrinking. Deckhands pulled down the forward hose, and the fire pumps supplied pressure. The hose kinked, burst in several places, and tore away from its coupling. Water spilled across the deck, but none reached the flames. The crew brought forward another hose. They could not connect it because part of the failed coupling remained attached to the standpipe. With no trained backup plan, organized firefighting effectively ended. Captain Van Schaik ordered full speed and directed the pilots toward North Brother Island. That decision became one of the central questions of the investigation. The captain and pilots maintained that they learned of the fire only when North Brother Island was the most practical place to beach. The Federal Commission did not accept that timeline. After comparing testimony from passengers, crew members, and witnesses on shore, investigators concluded that the pilot house knew about the fire before the vessel passed the eastern end of Ward's Island. At that earlier point, the Commission believed closer landing places were still available, including Little Hell Gate and Bronx Bills. Instead, the Slocum continued toward North Brother Island at an estimated 12 to 15 miles per hour. Its movement forced a stream of air from bow to stern. A moderate southerly wind added to the effect. Flames emerging near the front were driven directly toward the passengers behind them. Speed did not create the original fire, but it accelerated the spread, pushed people away from the only part of the vessel approaching land, and prolonged the time before beaching. Passengers moved aft and climbed to the upper decks. Smoke and flame blocked the bow. Without rehearsed crew assignments, there was no orderly evacuation, no successful launching of boats, and little effective direction. The choices narrowed quickly. Remaining aboard meant waiting for the fire. Entering the river meant deep water, strong current, and uncertain flotation. The engines continued turning until only seconds before impact. The Slocum struck North Brother Island at nearly full speed and stopped at an angle. The bow came within roughly 10 to 20 feet of shore in water about 7 feet deep. But the stern where the fire had forced most passengers remained 40 to 60 feet from land over water estimated at 10 to 30 feet deep. The vessel had reached shore without bringing most of its passengers close enough to safety. Within minutes, fire took control of the upper structure. Part of the crowded starboard side collapsed, throwing people into the river. The Commission estimated that between 400 and 600 passengers drowned after the beaching itself. The Slocum's own safety systems had failed, so rescue came from outside. The tugboats John L. Wade and Walter Tracy came alongside, joined by other craft. The Commission estimated that those two tugs alone prevented another 200 to 350 deaths. People on North Brother Island rushed to the shore and pulled survivors from the water. But outside rescuers were arriving after the passengers had already been trapped by the ship's equipment, crew preparation, and final position. The Libanov family shows what those failures meant inside one household. Paul and Anna survived, and so did infant Adela and 2 adult relatives. Helen and young Anna died, along with 2 cousins and 2 women from the extended family group. 11 people had boarded together, 6 were lost. Across Little Germany, similar losses emptied homes and divided families. Funerals continued for days and weeks. The excursion had drawn from a concentrated community, so the deaths were not spread across a city of strangers. They struck the same streets, church, clubs, schools, and family networks at once. When the Federal Commission reconstructed the disaster, it did not find a single cause. It found a system of failures, combustible storage, wooden construction, defective hose, deteriorated life preservers, boats that were never launched, an unlicensed mate, an undrilled crew, weak inspection, delayed beaching, high speed, and almost no organized assistance for passengers. The Commission also condemned the vessel's owners and the inspection service. Its most disturbing conclusion was that the Slocum was not an unusual ship. It was typical of many wooden excursion steamers still carrying passengers. The disaster had not exposed one uniquely cursed vessel. It had exposed accepted practices that had never been tested together under real pressure. Captain Van Schaik became the only person convicted. A federal appeals court upheld his conviction for criminal negligence tied to his failure to drill the crew and keep required safety equipment ready for use. He received a 10-year sentence, served several years, and was later pardoned by President William Howard Taft. The federal system also changed. President Theodore Roosevelt ordered personnel and regulatory action after the commission reported. In March 1905, Congress expanded the authority of the Steamboat Inspection Service to prescribe fire prevention measures and determine required life-saving equipment. But the legal consequences remained far smaller than the human loss. Even the death toll carries an unresolved contradiction. The Federal Commission's revised count recorded 957 deaths, 955 passengers, and 2 crew members. Later memorial and historical accounts commonly cite 1,021. The difference has never been consistently resolved in popular retellings. What can be said with confidence is that roughly 1,000 people died and that the Slocum became one of the deadliest disasters in New York City history. And then its public visibility diminished. There is no good evidence of a coordinated cover-up. Little Germany was already changing as some families moved to other neighborhoods. The disaster accelerated that dispersal by destroying households and institutions at the center of the community. During World War I, anti-German hostility further weakened the public standing of German-American culture. Other catastrophes became more prominent in New York's historical memory. The Slocum story never vanished completely. Survivors returned to memorial ceremonies. Historians, museums, and descendants preserved records and objects. But the people most likely to carry the story from one generation to the next had also suffered its greatest losses. Adela Liebenau, the 6-month-old survivor, became the youngest known person to escape the disaster. On the first anniversary, she helped unveil a monument to the unidentified dead. Her family preserved a sister's shoes and the dress Adela wore at the memorial. She lived until 2004. By then, the neighborhood around Tompkins Square no longer resembled the German-American world that had boarded the Slocum. North Brother Island had been abandoned. The memorial fountain remained, but it was easy to pass without understanding what it represented. The General Slocum was not forgotten because the disaster was too small to matter. It faded because the community that held its memory together was shattered in the same event. And perhaps the most revealing object left behind is not a burned plank or a broken life preserver. It is the inspection certificate issued only weeks before the fire, official proof that a vessel could be declared safe without anyone proving that its safety systems would work. For more carefully researched stories about the events America left behind, subscribe to Veil. Tell us which forgotten American disaster we should investigate next.